In 1985, I was a first-year university student and living as a housemaster at a boarding school with a fire alarm system so antiquated and smoke detectors so sensitive they'd be triggered by the fumes of lawnmowers outside on hot summer days, moths hitting them at night, and the delinquent behaviour of teenage boys 24/7. In February and March 1985, the state government under then Premier Joe Bjelke-Petersen was at war with the electrical trades unions. The result being rolling power outages across southeast Queensland for weeks on end. Remember the fun? Yeah. Every time the power went off and on, the fire alarm system would lose its everlasting mind and go off, and I would have to run through the boarding house like a maniac, clearing it of kids, while the fire brigade attended, checked everything and reset the alarms. This happened at all hours of the day and night, several times a night, every night, for weeks on end. I was so sleep deprived that my own mental circuitry was at high risk of having an outage of its own. And so in this desperate and dark situation, a little bit of mischief took place. Among the boys living in this boarding house was a 14-year-old who was the world's greatest fan of DIY. Charming the snake. Spanking the monkey. Debugging the hard drive. Making the bald man cry. This kid had his hands down his pants dating Mrs. Palmer and her 5 lovely daughters all day, every day. He saw more action than a university student in the 1980s. Trust me, I know. Every time the other boys caught him, they would torment and bully him mercilessly. One night during these power outages, while all the boys, except, I'll call him Tommy Tugger, were at dinner, I was in my quarters studying, and I heard a noise coming from the dormitory. So I set off to do a security check, and from the shared bedrooms, I heard a moaning and a groaning. I reached into the bedroom and flipped the light switch on and off a few times with an action that Tommy would be very familiar with, to catch his attention. And I said, "Put that away and get on with your homework." He had as much respect for authority as any teenage boy his age and completely ignored me. A few minutes later, the rest of the boys returned from supper, caught him in the act, and proceeded to wail on him. He threatened his tormentors that if they didn't stop, he would get up in the middle of the night and set off the fire alarms. Sure enough, the beating continued, and true to his word, Tommy arose at 1 o'clock the next morning, wrapped a sock around his knuckles, full of sticky residue, I'm sure, and took out a call point. The alarms wailed, the sirens blared, and the last vestiges of my sanity took their leave for greener pastures. In a bygone age when corporal punishment was still a thing, we probably would have disabled the offending hand with a good caning, but that wasn't possible in '85, so I decided that the best punishment for a very social little extrovert like Tommy Tugger was to spend every meal on his own in the dining room for a week, sitting in the corner, facing the wall, contemplating his life choices. Or at least that was his public punishment. In private, I thought somebody should impose a more sinister, revengeful punishment. And so somebody with a master key to all the boys' wardrobes and lockers found Tommy Tugger's jar of Vaseline, poured in green food dye, and stirred it with a paddle pop stick, evidently. Tommy must have had quite a bit of stress to relieve that night, because the next morning, from the other end of the dormitory, I heard quite a commotion. I ran through the dorm into the shared open shower area to see a ring of boys standing around a naked Tommy, looking from his hand to his person, trying to figure out how the hell he turned into Kermit the Frog overnight. Nobody ever discovered who committed that particular bit of mischief.